The day I caught my wife in a Chicago hotel with the divorce lawyer I was planning to hire, I didn't cry, yell, or throw a punch. I smiled so hard my cheeks hurt because in that instant, both of them had signed their own destruction papers without knowing it. Before I tell you how that cold-blooded mess unfolded, hit like, subscribe, and drop your city in the comments if you've ever seen Betrayal come dressed in a tailored suit. Trust me, this story gets uglier, funnier, and way more satisfying than you think. Now, let's get into it. My name is Darius Ellison, and 2 years ago, I was living what looked like a polished black success story on the south side of Chicago. I owned a growing logistics company, drove a paid-off Escalade, and came home every night to a woman people swore belonged in a luxury ad campaign. My wife, Alana, was beautiful, educated, funny, and so smooth in public that older church ladies used to grab my arm and say, "Baby, don't mess that up." What nobody knew was that our house had gone cold months earlier. We were married on paper, roommates in spirit, and strangers in every quiet room. At first, I blamed stress. My company had expanded into Milwaukee, the contracts were getting bigger, and I was sleeping with one eye open and one hand on my phone. Alana worked in nonprofit fundraising, so our schedules clashed constantly. Still, there were little things I couldn't shake. She started guarding her phone like it contained national secrets. She laughed at messages with her body turned away. She began wearing perfume to weekday meetings when she used to wear lip balm and call it enough. None of that proves cheating, but every married person knows when the air changes inside their own home. The part that made the betrayal sting harder was that we really had been in love once. We met at a rooftop poetry event in Bronzeville when she roasted my shoes, then asked if I was buying her a drink to recover from seeing them. I told her only if she admitted she liked me first. She laughed so hard she snorted, then blamed the wind. For 6 months, we lived on tacos, late-night drives by the lake, and voice notes that sounded like songs. We slow danced in kitchens, made dumb jokes in grocery stores, and talked about growing old like it was already scheduled. One Sunday in March, my cousin Trayvon came over to watch the Bulls game and nearly choked on a rib when Alana breezed through the kitchen dressed like she was headed to an awards show for a simple brunch fundraiser. Trayvon looked from her heels to the deviled eggs in her hand and whispered, "Cousin, are they honoring the eggs?" I laughed, but something in me tightened. Alana kissed my cheek too carefully, like an actress hitting a mark, then left smelling expensive and distracted. Trayvon waited until the door shut before saying, "D, I don't know what's wrong, but something in here feels rehearsed." I try to be fair. I ask questions without sounding accusing, and Alana always had polished answers ready. The perfume was because donors noticed presentation. The phone privacy was because one coworker had a stalking ex. The late meetings were board season. Every explanation made sense by itself, which somehow made it worse. A lie wrapped in logic is harder to pull apart. Meanwhile, our arguments got strangely formal. She stopped fighting like a wife and started responding like a spokesperson. One night, I told her, "We don't even talk anymore." And she said, "Maybe we've outgrown what talking used to solve." That sentence sat in my chest. A week later, I found a business card in her coat pocket from a family law firm in River North. The name embossed in dark blue letters was Quentin Vale, partner. At first, I thought maybe one of her donors needed legal help. Then I noticed a note written across the back in her handwriting. "Tuesday, 6:30, don't be late this time." My stomach dropped so fast it felt like missing a step in the dark. I didn't confront her. I put the card back exactly where I found it and started making my own plans. If divorce was coming, I needed to get ahead of it quietly. The next morning, I called my banker, my accountant, and an old fraternity brother named Sheldon who worked in compliance. I wasn't trying to start a war. I was trying to understand the battlefield. Sheldon told me the smartest move was simple. Get legal counsel quietly, gather documents, and never let emotion outrun paperwork. I asked if he knew any sharp divorce attorneys in Chicago who didn't play games. He laughed once and said, "Man, everybody with money ends up at the same 3 names." Then he texted me the recommendation. My hand went cold. The top name on the list was Quentin Vale. I wanted to believe it was coincidence, but my instincts were screaming too loud now. Still, I needed proof before I blew up my own life. So I scheduled a consultation under my assistant's name for the following Friday and kept acting normal at home. That week, Alana was unusually sweet. She made my favorite garlic salmon, sent me a flirty text during work, and even rested her head on my shoulder during a movie. I almost laughed. Guilt will turn people into temporary soulmates. The sweeter she acted, the clearer it became that she was trying to soften me for something she had already decided to do. Friday came, and I drove to River North in a navy suit and a calm face. Quentin Vale's office looked like old money had hired a minimalist designer. Cream walls, black art, silent assistants, and water in glass bottles too fancy to open. Quentin himself was handsome in a precise, almost manufactured way. Dark brown skin, silver cuff links, clean beard, voice smooth enough to sell grief back to a widow. He shook my hand and said, "Mr. Ellison, I've heard impressive things about your company." The moment he said that, I knew something was off. I had never mentioned my company on any intake form. I played along anyway. I told him my marriage had become strained and I needed to know my options. Quentin nodded with the right amount of concern, but there was a flicker in his eyes that felt less professional than predatory. He asked unusually specific questions about my business accounts, inherited property, and whether our prenup had infidelity clauses. A good lawyer might ask that, sure, but not with that much hunger. When I mentioned my wife worked in fundraising, he looked down too quickly, like he was hiding recognition. I left 20 minutes later with a folder, a headache, and a certainty I could no longer ignore. That night, I told Alana I had a surprise client dinner on Monday. She smiled and said she had a donor cocktail event anyway, which gave me all the confirmation I needed. Monday afternoon, I called Quentin's office pretending I wanted to move forward and asked his receptionist if he had availability for an urgent evening call. She apologized and said Mr. Vale was unexpectedly unavailable after 6 due to a private matter. Private matter. I thanked her, hung up, and sat in my truck for 10 silent seconds. Then I called Trayvon, who answered with, "Say less. I'm already putting shoes on." Trayvon met me near a boutique hotel in West Loop because I had used a contact in building security to track Quentin's usual after-hours parking. The man's car was there before sunset. Alana's Lexus pulled in 11 minutes later. Trayvon looked at me, then at the windshield, then whispered, "Lord, let me not go viral today." I should have been shattered, but what I felt was colder than heartbreak. It was clarity. We watched them walk into the lobby separately, then board the same elevator after pretending not to know each other. That little performance insulted me more than the affair itself. They thought I was stupid. I could have stormed upstairs, but anger without strategy is a gift to guilty people, and I was done handing out gifts. Instead, I took photos, recorded timestamps, and texted Sheldon everything. He replied with one sentence: "Do not confront. Preserve evidence and protect assets first." Trayvon, meanwhile, was muttering commentary so funny I nearly smiled against my own will. He said Quentin walked like a man who moisturized with malpractice. Even in that ugly moment, I needed that laugh. Betrayal can hollow you out fast, and sometimes one ridiculous joke keeps your pride from collapsing in public. Over the next 3 weeks, I became a quiet machine. I copied financial records, changed account permissions, documented communication, and hired a different attorney in Naperville named Yvette Harlan, a woman so sharp she made legal pads look nervous. Yvette listened to everything without interrupting, then said, "Darius, your wife's behavior is messy, but the lawyer's behavior may be suicidal." She explained conflict rules, ethics complaints, disclosure duties, and the kind of professional fallout that could crack a man's career wide open. That was the first time I felt something like peace. I wasn't chasing revenge anymore. I was constructing consequences, living in the same house with Alana while knowing what I knew was its own kind of torture. She kept performing marriage in small, insulting ways. She asked whether I wanted oat milk in my coffee. She laughed at my aunt's jokes over speakerphone. She touched my arm in public when friends were around. One night she crawled into bed and said, "We should plan a weekend away." I stared into the dark and wondered how somebody could sound so tender while living so crooked. I told her we would talk later. She kissed my shoulder and fell asleep. I stayed awake until sunrise, furious at memory itself. The romantic scenes hurt the most because they were so ordinary. Saturday mornings used to belong to us. She would dance badly in my old college t-shirt while making cinnamon waffles, and I would pretend not to stare when sunlight hit her face. Sometimes we'd slow dance in the kitchen to old-school R&B, laughing because neither of us could stay on beat longer than 30 seconds. Those memories kept colliding with the image of her in that hotel elevator, chin lifted, walking toward another man like she had every right. That is what betrayal really destroys. It murders your favorite memories and makes them feel suspicious. Then came a scene that still makes people laugh when I tell it. My mother hosted Easter dinner in Oak Park, and Alana arrived in a soft yellow dress acting like Coretta with a casserole. Quentin wasn't there, obviously, but his name floated into the room anyway when my Aunt Bernice started talking about needing a divorce lawyer for her bridge partner. Before I could breathe, Alana nearly dropped the sweet tea pitcher. Aunt Bernice noticed immediately and asked, "Child, why you look like the lawyer owes you money?" Trayvon bent over coughing to hide his laughter. I almost choked on ham. Guilt does not travel well to family gatherings. A few days later, Alana tried romance like she was testing a new campaign strategy. She sent me throwback photos from our first anniversary in Detroit, saying she missed us. She ordered takeout from the soul food spot where we had our second date and lit candles in the dining room. For a sliver of a moment, I saw the woman I had married reaching through the wreckage, and that made me angrier than cruelty ever could. Because if she still remembered how to love me, then every lie was chosen. We ate in soft music and false warmth, and she actually said, "Maybe we're finding each other again." I smiled and said, "Maybe." By then, Yvette had assembled everything. Hotel records, photos, email, metadata, my consultation notes with Quentin. Financial protections were in place, the ethics complaint was drafted, and the divorce filing was ready. She asked how public I wanted the confrontation to be. I said, not social media public, just unforgettable. We chose a fundraiser Alana had spent months planning at the Museum of Contemporary Art, a room full of donors, board members, and polished professionals who thought they knew us. Quentin was attending as outside counsel for one of the sponsors. The irony was so thick you could cut it with a church fan. Perfect. Absolutely perfect. The night of the event, I wore a black tuxedo and the kind of calm that terrifies guilty people. Alana greeted guests on my arm, glowing under gallery lights, introducing me as her wonderful husband with a hand resting lightly on my back. Quentin arrived 20 minutes later, and when our eyes met, that polished confidence in him flickered for half a second. He knew I knew something. He just didn't know how much. During cocktails, Alana floated between tables laughing too brightly, while Quentin worked the room with his courtroom smile. Watching them coordinate distance in public was almost theatrical. They looked like duet singers pretending to hate harmony. When the director invited guests to gather for remarks, I stepped toward the microphone before she could. Alana's smile froze. Quentin's shoulders tightened. I thanked the museum, praised the fundraising team, and told a warm story about partnership, trust, and how institutions survive when ethics mean more than appearances. Heads nodded. People smiled. Then I shifted. I said, "Speaking of appearances, I want to thank my wife for teaching me that betrayal can be educational, and attorney Quentin Vale for proving that conflict of interest is not just a phrase in legal seminars." You could feel the room inhale all at once. Silence turned physical. Alana whispered my name like a warning, but I kept going. I held up the consultation folder from Quentin's office and said I had met this man while seeking counsel for my marriage, only to discover he was privately involved with the very spouse whose secrets he was professionally positioned to exploit. I didn't yell. That made it worse. Donors stared. Board members shifted. Somebody in the back said, "Oh my God," without even trying to whisper. Quentin stepped forward like he wanted to regain control, but Yvette rose from the second table, introduced herself, and informed him that formal complaints had already been filed. Cleanest body blow I've ever seen. What happened next was brutal in the way expensive people fear most. No fists, no screaming, just status evaporating in real time. Quentin tried to speak, But one sponsor's general counsel cut him off and asked whether he had disclosed this conflict to anyone. He hadn't. Another donor quietly lowered the glass in her hand and stepped away from Alana like dishonesty might be contagious. The museum director looked ready to levitate from stress. Alana finally snapped and accused me of humiliating her on purpose. I said, "No, Alana. You humiliated yourself. I just made sure witnesses were present." Trayvon later called that line championship material. Then Alana made the mistake that finished her. She turned on Quentin and shouted, "You told me nobody could prove anything." The room erupted in murmurs so loud it sounded like rain on a roof. Quentin's face emptied out. He looked less like a brilliant attorney than a man realizing his own ego had walked him naked into traffic. Yvette did not smile, but I did. Small, measured, deadly. Security approached, not because anyone was violent, but because chaos has a dress code at those events. As Alana grabbed her clutch, Aunt Bernice's words flashed through my mind. Now, everybody knew exactly why the lawyer looked expensive and nervous. Outside the museum, cameras from nobody important blogs were already sniffing around because wealthy embarrassment travels fast in this city. I didn't feed them. I simply walked to my car while Alana cried behind me and Quentin argued with someone on speakerphone in a voice that had lost all its silk. Trayvon, who had attended as my guest strictly for moral support and elite commentary, slid into the passenger seat and said, "Cousin, that was the Black Excellence Avengers." I laughed for the first time in weeks. Not because my marriage was over. That part still hurt. I laughed because lies had finally been dragged into daylight where they looked weak. The legal fallout landed exactly the way Yvette predicted. Quentin's firm placed him on immediate leave pending investigation. A bar complaint became a full ethics review. One corporate client cut ties within days. His polished website vanished a week later like it had never existed. Alana's nonprofit board asked her to step back during their own internal review because donors were gossiping and appearances suddenly mattered very much. She called me 11 times in one night, alternating between rage, tears, and attempts to sound nostalgic. I let every call die. Some apologies aren't late. They're counterfeit. By then, I could hear the fake mint in her breath through voicemail. Our divorce moved fast after that. Because I had documented finances early, protected my company, and followed counsel instead of emotion, the damage stayed limited. Alana fought hardest over the house, not because she loved it, but because she loved what it represented online. We settled with a sale. Watching strangers tour the kitchen where we used to dance felt surreal, but also cleansing. The walls had heard too many lies. Months later, after the dust settled, I met a woman named Imani Sloan at a small business panel in Detroit. She was funny, sharp, patient, and peaceful in a way I didn't know I needed. We built slowly, honestly, and grown. Imani never asked me to become soft on command. She just showed me that peace could exist without performance. We took road trips, argued about music, laughed about airport coffee, and learned each other without pretending to be perfect. She met my mother and won her over by bringing peach cobbler and correcting one of my childhood stories. Trayvon called her God's reward for surviving clown school, which is still disrespectful and accurate. Loving again didn't erase what Alana did. It proved the story didn't get the last word. That mattered more than revenge. Revenge closed one chapter. Real love made sure I didn't live in it forever. The last real conversation I had with Alana happened outside the courthouse after the final hearing. She looked tired, smaller somehow, like vanity had stopped paying her rent. She asked whether I had ever loved her at all, which told me she still needed me to be the villain to survive being the author of her own collapse. I told her the truth. I love you enough to build a life with you. I just love myself too much now to let betrayal rewrite my name. She cried. I walked away. So tell me in the comments, what was the coldest moment in this whole story?